Hi, everyone. My name is Julia,
And I'm Katie.
and we're the hosts of the Runways and Byways travel podcast. So today we're going to be talking about solo travel, which Katie claims to be an expert in. So
I wouldn't say expert, but it is something that I've done and I did it successfully, I believe. And it's something that I want to keep doing. So I'm really excited.
I'm excited to hear about it because I've never solo traveled and I've spoken to Katie about it before, but I feel like I don't have all the details. So I really want to hear them all and see if it's right for me.
Yay. So excited.
But first, Katie, you have your question for this week.
I do. And I feel like you might get this one. So
Okay.
we'll see. Okay. So the question is, what country has the longest coastline in the world?
Oh, country? I don't know.
I mean,
Oh,
you'll
duh.
get it. No, don't say anything. Just wait until the end.
No, I actually might be wrong.
Okay.
But I feel like it makes sense. My guess. I think it
Okay.
makes sense. But does it make I'll think. I have a whole episode to think.
Okay. At least it's not like an oh duh like it was last week.
No, thinking again, I don't think it's an Oda. I think I'm wrong actually.
I guess we'll see.
I
Time
have a
will tell.
question.
Okay.
So does coastline, is it a continuous coastline or you know, ignore me. I need to process my thoughts first. And then
Okay.
okay, we'll revisit this.
Yes.
Okay. So I have some questions for you, Katie. Are we ready to start?
I am ready.
Okay. So first, where have you traveled solo? Because I know about at least one solo trip you've done, but I'm not sure if there's others. So I'd like to hear.
Yeah, so my biggest solo trip was when I went to Raleigh, North Carolina. And then I went to Julia's home state of Orlando, which I was gonna do by myself, but then she said that I could stay with her. So that wasn't really solo. So technically my only solo one was to Raleigh, North Carolina.
Which is more than I've done. So
It's something. And it was definitely quite the trip. So
yeah, I've never had a trip that was fully solo. I've flown places by myself, but once I get there, I always have someone. So I'm interested to hear what it's like to have no one.
yeah, it was definitely different than
And
traveling with friends.
yeah, and I've spoken to solo travelers online, and they've told me that you make a lot of friends when you get there. Did you have the
Mm.
similar experience?
I did not. I was kind of hoping to, but I really didn't make a ton of friends. I also wasn't there for super long. I was only there for like 3 days.
Hmm.
But yeah, I definitely didn't have that experience. Maybe one day.
Maybe one day. So, what made you want to solo travel?
So the reason I wanted to solo travel is because I live in New York currently, but I really wanted to move out of state. And I was considering a few options at the time. One was North Carolina, and the other one was Florida. So I decided to go by myself to Raleigh, North Carolina to check out the town. And I really wanted to do it by myself because I wanted to see my own inner voice and see if that was somewhere I could be by myself. Because obviously, when you're traveling, or when you're moving somewhere, you're doing it all by yourself. So I wanted to see if I could fit in and if my own mind and soul would tell me that this is the place.
Hmm.
So that was the reason that I wanted to go to Raleigh alone.
So, before this whole wanting to move experience, did you ever want to solo travel, or was it simply because of that?
It was something that I wanted to do, but I was always kind of like, I'll wait until I'm kind of pushed in that direction because I always feel like there was options for me to invite this person or my family. So there was never any need for a vacation to do that. So this was something that I really knew I had to do by myself. So there was no other option for me to bring anybody else. And
Hmm.
even if I did ask anybody else, I feel like Raleigh really isn't the place that other people want to go with you because it's not a super big vacation spot. So, like I said, that's the main reason why I knew I had to do Raleigh by myself at this time.
I would have gone with you.
That's sweet.
Yeah,
But
it
then
is.
also, I was going to Florida. So it was kind of like you would have had to go to Raleigh and then go back to Florida. And like I said before, if it is somewhere I want to move, I need to know for myself if I feel 100% comfortable in that city.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, because you don't
yeah.
want someone making it more fun than it actually is, and then you get there by yourself and you're like, oh, I actually don't like this.
Yeah, or less fun. Like if I'm obsessed with it and the person I'm with is like, "Oh, I hate this." You can be
Yeah.
swayed. So I really didn't want that because like I said, it wasn't a vacation for me. I was going in with a goal.
Yeah, you meant business.
I did.
So now that you have solo traveled, and even though you meant business that time, do you think you would solo travel again, but for vacation?
100%. 100%. It was something that was so much fun. I think I grew a lot as a person doing that. And now it's something that if I wanted to go somewhere and nobody else can go with me, I feel 100% comfortable doing any place by myself.
That's great to hear because I feel that's how I've been thinking. There's a lot of places I want to go, but there's not always someone available to go with me. And I'm like, I'm
Mhm.
free, I could go, but why would I go by myself? But maybe I
Yeah,
should go by myself.
100%. I think that it would be so much growth as an individual and to really follow your inner voice during that trip of what you like when it's not tempted by anybody else. I would definitely recommend it for everybody.
So that kind of brings me to my next point in you saying that there are certain things that you would want to do without anyone swaying you. So how was the planning process and how did it differ from planning with someone else?
Yeah, so the planning process for me was a little bit convoluted just because Raleigh, it's a city, it's not really a place where there's a bunch of tourist attractions. For example, if I was going to go to, let's say, Puerto Rico, right? There's so many different recommendations you could do and you could follow what people are saying. But for Raleigh, it's really a place that you have to find your own things. There's really not anyone to tell you, oh, this is great for tourists, because, like I said, it's not a tourist attraction. So
Mhm.
I kind of went into it listing a bunch of options that I could do, listing a bunch of restaurants that looked good to me, a bunch of places that looked good to me. But then when I went there is when I really filled out the day because I didn't want to schedule it so tightly that I was doing things I didn't enjoy. I really wanted to be spontaneous, which is something you really always can't do with friends.
Mhm.
Because, like we mentioned with the traveling with friends, it's important to have an itinerary where you could stick to so that there's not too much conversation happening. But with yourself, you do have the freedom to be more spontaneous, which was really exciting.
Yeah, that's true. I feel like when you're on a trip by yourself, you can, if you walk past a coffee shop and want to go in, you don't
Mm-hmm.
have to say to your friend, "Hey, can we go in this coffee shop?" You just go in.
You just go in, and there's other solo travelers that I follow who were saying too, like they go to Paris by themselves, and like you said, like they see a bakery, they want to go in, they could spend 3 hours in that bakery. You can't do that with friends. Or if they want to go shopping and a friend wants to see the Eiffel Tower, it's just so amazing to be able to have the freedom to do what you want when you want at that time.
So that kind of brings me to my next point. When you got to your destination, how was it different from traveling with a friend? I know you kind of mentioned this a little bit just now, but is there anything else you'd want to say about that?
Yeah, so as soon as I landed, it was pretty early, so I couldn't go to the hotel yet. And it was just interesting because with a friend, it's kind of like, okay, what do you want to do? But I really had to sit with myself and be like, okay, what is the best option for myself at this time? And I decided to go to brunch. So I called at the place, booked a table for one, and I did brunch by myself. It was a little bit stressful because I did have a carry-on. So I was just carrying my suitcase with me through the city. I looked like such a tourist,
We've all been there.
but yeah. But it was really nice. And I just had a brunch by myself. I had a mimosa. And from there, after that, I still had more time. I couldn't go to the hotel yet. So I literally just walked around the city and explored and looked into different shops. And I think I went to a cafe as well after that just to hang out. And it was kind of nice to just be alone with my own thoughts. And then from there is when I started to think about what I wanted to do for the next couple of days. So you do have a lot of alone time to think when you're doing a solo travel, which I think is really healthy and productive to have that time. And then from there, I checked into the hotel, which was a little bit scary. I did do it a little bit cheaper for the hotel than I normally would because when you're traveling with a friend, you can always split the price of the hotel. So it's actually kind of cheaper when you're traveling with a friend because you
Hmm.
split everything. But for me, I had to pay the full price of a hotel. Whereas if I went with you, we could split it. So I decided to go cheaper, which looking back, I do regret because I should have found a place that was in the middle of Raleigh because I found a cheaper place that was outside of Raleigh and had to keep on Ubering, which again, you
Hmm.
could not split the cost of the Uber. So that was a silly mistake on my end. And it was just like not really a nice area. I was in the middle of nowhere and there was nowhere for me to walk. Like when we went to the hotel in New Orleans, we could walk here, walk there. It was in the middle. I felt very safe. I did not feel safe in this hotel. So that's something to note for travelers. Really consider your location. And if it is a little bit more expensive to stay in the city, maybe consider going to that city because you really want to do prioritize safety more than anything, is something I've realized.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because something that really holds me back from traveling alone is safety. I
Mm-hmm.
always travel with people because I want that safety net that if something goes wrong or if I'm in a dangerous situation, that someone else is there with me and I'm not just in it by myself. But
Yeah.
that's why I've never gone anywhere by myself, just being a small person and a woman. It's always been very scary to me. So how did you navigate that, especially being in a situation that you were a little scared in for your safety?
Yeah, so I think one way to navigate it is to do as many things as you can during the daylight and at night really consider if you want to go out, which is one thing that's pretty unfortunate because it is fun to go out at night when you're with friends and everything, but as a solo travel, you really have to consider it. You also have to watch your alcohol intake with your friends. You can get a little bit more drunk and you're probably a little bit on the safe side with that. But as a solo traveler, I really would not recommend overdoing it with the drinking because it's just yourself and there's nobody holding you, helping you through that. So I would definitely recommend that. Um, on my second day, I decided to go to the movies at night. So I felt very comfortable, very safe in the movie, which was really fun. And it's also something that like when you're on a vacation with somebody, you're really not going to go to the movies. But since I was by myself, I was like, you know what? It's just me here. Let me go to this movie. And I had so much fun. However, after the movie, the Uber took 15 minutes to come. I was outside by myself and there were these guys talking to me and I did feel very scared and very unsafe. So as a solo traveler, it's really important to think about your transportation ahead of time. If you're in a city like this and Ubers don't come every minute, if you're going to have to wait, you really have to consider that because I just felt so unsafe and there was nobody around. So that was really scary. So I think with safety, you can be safe, but you have to think one step ahead with everything.
So do you think that Raleigh is a safe place for solo travelers? Would you recommend it to people who are thinking of traveling solo?
I would say stay in the city. Do not go on the outskirts because the thing with Raleigh is like if you go 20 minutes outside of the city, you're kind of in the middle of country. Definitely would not recommend that as a solo traveler. That's what I did with the movies. It was in the middle of nowhere and that was very dangerous. So looking back, I should have gone to the movies in approximation with the city. And like I said, I think you need to get a hotel that's in the city because then you're around people. Don't go anywhere where you're alone because it's so easy for someone to just pick you up. Honestly, someone totally could have picked me up in that moment and that would have been it. And that's really scary to think about. So I do think Raleigh's safe. However, with Raleigh, I don't think it's a big touristy area. I would recommend something like Savannah, Georgia, which is where I may potentially solo travel with. If you're not available, I'll totally go there because with Savannah, Georgia, it's in the middle of a city and everything's extremely accessible. So I think there's a lot of fun things to do by yourself, which a lot of other tourists are there and doing it with you. And you don't feel like you're in the middle of nowhere. So with Raleigh, sure, you can go to the city. I don't think it's the most fun place to go, though, honestly.
So it kind of sounds like a lot of it comes down to planning in advance of what you
Mm-hmm.
want to do so you don't wind up in a situation that you're not comfortable in.
Yes. And honestly, I didn't really plan in advance. Like I said, I listed out my options and was spontaneous, which was fun. But when you're planning, like I could have planned that morning. I really needed to consider where this place was, if I felt safe. Because if I could do it again, I probably would not have done that movie theater because it was a little
Mhm.
bit out of the way. So that's just something to consider is, plan ahead and always be around people in the daylight and really consider if you want to go out at night because that's when real like scary things could happen is at nighttime.
So it kind of sounds, what kind of places would you recommend for a solo travel? It kind of sounds you'd recommend something more touristy, more populated.
Mm-hmm. I would recommend a city for solo travelers. I really wouldn't do something that's big into the country because, like I said, that's where you can just go missing and no one can spot you. I would recommend somewhere in the city. Like I said, Savannah, Georgia, I think would be such an ideal place for a solo traveler because you can find a million recommendations online for touristy things to do. It's a place where a lot of tourists go, families go, where everyone could see you and if anything was going to happen they could be a witness to that. So I definitely recommend Savannah, Georgia. Even New Orleans, I think would be a good place for a few days, right? I felt like pretty safe when we were in that city.
I agree. I mean, there was some questionable people here and there, but I think
Mm-hmm.
overall there was always a lot of people around. So I never felt like, oh, this guy can take me because there were so many people around everyone would see.
Yeah, and I feel like the restaurants that we went to, it was only about a block away from the hotel. So even if you're out at night, everybody else is out at night and it's populated. So I wouldn't feel too overwhelmed. I would say when it goes to Europe, Paris, I think would be a great place to travel alone solo because you're in a city, people can see you, and there's a bunch of touristy attractions to do. I wouldn't do anything too obscure. I know you were saying you know of solo travelers who went to Asia and you said they loved it. Do you know any more details about what they thought about that?
Yeah, but before I get to that, I kind of want to circle back to your point about Paris because I don't know if I fully
Mm,
agree. Because I have been to Paris and I don't know if that would be where I would go for solo travel. If I were to go solo travel in Europe, I don't think that would be my top choice.
okay, why is
I
that?
know you know of people that have done it there, but
Mm-hmm.
me personally, I don't know if I would feel completely comfortable because number one, I think it's the highest rate of pickpocketing in Europe.
Mm,
They really take advantage of tourists there. And I think if you don't really know what you're doing, people are going to take advantage of you. There's always people coming up to you wanting things from you. It's a huge city. It's one of the biggest cities in Europe. It's one of the biggest cities in the world that everyone knows about. So people know you're a tourist. They're going to take advantage of you. And part, a lot of my time in Paris, I don't know if I felt completely safe just because
mm,
people are always watching you and trying to figure out where you're going to slip up and take advantage of you. And I actually
yeah.
got lost in Paris and separated from my group, and it was very scary. And I didn't know the language, which I mean, can happen anywhere. That could be the case anywhere in the world. But
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Paris, I'm not 100% sure if I completely agree, but I
Yeah.
guess you need to know yourself and know what you're comfortable with because I don't know if I'd be comfortable with it. But you said that you know of other solo travelers that have done that and
Mm-hmm.
they seem comfortable with that. So I guess maybe baby steps.
Baby steps. Honestly, I don't think I'd want to go to Paris either. I just know that a few YouTubers that I watch went and they enjoyed it. But, I feel like everybody has different levels of comfortability. I probably wouldn't feel comfortable either because I'm just so used to being in New York that I think it would be like the same old, same old. And yeah, I mean, if you're not from New York and you want to solo travel in New York, you can. But even with cities, it could be a little bit sketchy. So I think you should do your research ahead of time for sure.
I think especially with New York because like I said, it's similar with Paris. People know when you're a tourist.
And that brings me to another good point is when you're solo traveling, you really have to act like you're not a tourist. For me with Raleigh, I think that lugging my suitcase around was not smart because it shows that I'm not from around here. I'm a young girl, I'm vulnerable. I think that if your hotel has an option that you could put your suitcase in there ahead of time, you should definitely go with that. And when you walk around, don't like look in awe and inspiration and all that stuff, like all whimsical. You should really have a very stern face on so that people might not want to mess with you as much. Like, don't be so naive thinking that everybody there wants to be your friend and all that stuff. Like, of course, be kind, but I think you should also be on your guard as well.
I agree. That's a good point with the luggage, not only for convenience, but just, yeah, you don't want everyone to know that you're not from there and you could be taken advantage of. That's a big safety thing. I mean, I know I haven't solo traveled, but I just know from my experience traveling even with other people that it's always a concern of people taking advantage of you.
Yeah, for sure. And like I said, there were so many moments in Raleigh where I did feel unsafe. But I think going forward, if I was going to do Raleigh again, I would know what to do ahead of time and then I would feel safe. So
Mhm.
those were really my mistakes, but I learned from it. And so that's why I'm sharing it with you guys.
So, what was your question that you asked me about Asia? I know you asked me a question about solo travel in Asia, but I forgot exactly what you mentioned.
Yeah, because I was kind of thinking if I was going to solo travel in Asia, I don't think I'd even want to do it. I think I'd feel a little bit scared. But you said that you know people who were solo traveling and they're having a great time. So do you know what they said about it?
Yeah, so I actually spoke to her a lot about it. It was a girl that I met online, and we spoke very in depth about it. And I was telling her I've been to Asia and I don't think I would solo travel there. Like, how did you do it? And I told her where I went in Asia. I went to Japan. And she was saying that she wouldn't solo travel to Japan either because
Mm,
nobody really speaks, even in Tokyo, it was very
yeah.
hard to find someone that spoke English. And a lot of the younger people, I know they learned it in school, and I was able to talk to some people here and there, but there was kind of an emergency at one point, quote unquote emergency, where my friend had stepped on something and it got like into her foot and it cut her, and we needed a band-aid, and I kept asking around if anyone had bandages, and nobody understood what I was saying, and I was like trying to act it out, and it was really difficult. And I think if I ever ran into an emergency in Japan alone, that would have been a disaster. Even though it is a very efficient city, they have a very efficient subway system. I don't even know if you can call it a subway. I think it's above ground. I don't know. Anyways, but it is a very efficient city, but getting around was very difficult, not knowing the language, and not many people knew the language. So my language. So it was difficult for me. But she went to Indonesia, the girl I was talking to.
Wow.
And she was saying that solo travel there is very easy, and most people you run into are actually solo travelers. So
Mm,
it's almost like you make a community for yourself. And she said the locals are very friendly. I read somewhere that Indonesia has some of the nicest people in the world,
they do,
and
yeah.
they all speak English because their country kind of runs on tourism.
Mm.
So I think solo travel in Asia definitely sounds possible, but I think it depends where you're going.
Yeah, and I think you need to do your research because was it Bali that she was in?
Yes.
Yeah, Bali is huge for tourism, and there's so many Americans, Europeans there that you can build a community. But like you said with Japan, I think it is possible to solo travel there, but you need to do your research. You need to know where you want to go, what you want to do. And I think it would also be very important to at least learn the basics of the language. Learn the words that you think if you're in an emergency, you would need to know. For example, like, with a band-aid or, help, if that word, to learn that word or learn very specific words, food, coffee, whatever, things that you might have to stop and ask somebody if you don't know, because that's something I can't do because I don't really know much about Japanese culture. I don't know the language. So for me, I would definitely not feel safe there. But if you want to go, I would just, like I said, research different things about it and know what you need to know before going there.
Yeah, I definitely don't want to stop anyone from traveling solo to a country where you don't speak their language, because I mean, I've never solo traveled, like I said, but I do think there's people that solo travel to every country in the world and they're able to do it. So there should be nothing
Mm-hmm.
that stops you, but I definitely think it takes more preparation. And I definitely don't think that maybe Japan should be your first solo travel trip.
Yeah, and I mentioned this a few weeks ago, which you still have to give us an update.
Mhm.
When I said to start small, I Raleigh for me is starting small because it's still in America. It's really not that far, and I knew I was going to you afterwards, so it wasn't like the whole trip was centered around that. But do you remember when we spoke a few weeks ago and you said don't hold me to it, and I said I would? Did you end up eating alone at a restaurant?
Well, I'm glad I said don't hold me to it, because no, but I'll explain why. I have a load of excuses for you. So
Oh, I can't wait to hear them.
we had a hurricane, everything was closed.
Mm.
Then my cat got sick, and I had to run around to a lot of hospitals for him because he had liver failure. So you should feel bad for me because I was running around and sad. And then I got strep, and I have strep right now, actually. So
Mm-mm.
you don't want me going to a restaurant and infecting everybody.
Okay, good point. So
So
after this podcast, I'm holding you to it.
maybe,
Okay.
because I don't know if the strep will go away. Some bacteria are becoming resistant to antibiotics, so I wouldn't hold me to it for a while, just in case.
Well, I'm seeing you next week, so bacteria better be gone.
Or you'll just get sick too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I can't go out to dinner alone next week either because you'll be here, so sorry.
Okay. Well, for our listeners, if you've never gone solo traveling before, I would recommend to start small. I told Julia, start on the next town over. Or if you feel like you can do even more, a few states over, somewhere that if you were in a real emergency, you'd feel okay being. Like I said, I don't think your first solo trip should be halfway across the world in China. I think that's really scared. And I know, Julie, you were saying too, like, oh, why would I not feel comfortable being in Asia? Well, I think it makes sense if you didn't feel comfortable. I think that's your intuition telling you you're not ready for all that yet. That's too much.
I definitely think it would be too much because considering I'm scared to just go out to dinner by myself, I can't go halfway across the world and pretend like I'm okay.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think it's just about knowing your limits, knowing your comfort zone, being right outside of it, but still feeling comfortable that you're safe, because safety is the most important thing here.
100%. And that is what holds back a lot of people. I mean, that's my biggest reason. And I think that's a lot of people's biggest reason. So I think you really need to sit down and think about the safety in advance, like Katie was saying, planning
Mm-hmm.
out where you're staying, staying in a central area.
Mm-hmm.
And what else did you say? I'm losing my mind because I'm sick. About
Don't go out at night unless it's somewhere that you feel very comfortable in like a restaurant, maybe a few blocks away, fine. But going across town and drinking and just being in a place that there's not too many people is very unsafe. And I would not recommend that. I'd recommend, like I said, staying close to the proximity when you know there's a decent amount of people and it could be possible.
That's great that you mentioned all that. I will definitely take note of that for my
Yes.
impending solo travel trip.
And do not
Um,
look like a tourist.
I'll try.
Yeah.
So I do have a couple more questions for you that I just didn't get to ask you because we started talking about other things. But how do you think your trip would have differed if you went with a friend? Do you regret not going with a friend? Like, how do you think things would have been different, good or
Um,
bad?
I don't regret not going with a friend because I do think I learned a lot about myself, and it was nice to be able to go out and to not feel bad for wanting certain things. Like I said, I went to a movie, which people do not go to movies on trips, but I said I wanted to. I love going to movies. It's so much fun. So I think doing that was really fun, and just going on like a guilt-free trip of just doing whatever you want was really fun. I know that if you were there, I honestly probably would have had more fun. But I think solo traveling is a different type of fun because, like I said before, it's a getting to know yourself, knowing your likes, dislikes. And you could do that with a friend, but it's just a different way of knowing yourself, because I think you need to be alone first in order to do that with a friend. And honestly, by the time that rally is over, I was dying to see you. Like, I was so excited to see you. And I even thought to
Aw.
myself, like, I don't even care. Like, we could literally do so many extroverted things, go here, there, wherever, but I really miss being with a friend. And I feel like you can't have that feeling unless you know what it's like to be very alone, and even in a place that you feel uncomfortable with. I think you need to have that feeling in order to appreciate your friends and your family and people that you do go traveling with.
So I had wanted to ask you that before. You did feel lonely while you were there?
Definitely, yeah. And I did embrace the loneliness, and I'm really proud of myself. But honestly, if it was another day more, I would have been really, really upset. The last day, I literally just ended up going to the mall, and I was just trying to find things to do because there really wasn't too much to do in Raleigh. And at that point, I knew that wasn't the city for me. So it wasn't even really exciting. So I knew that when I was going to you, that I was so ready. And honestly, I'm so happy I did it, because when I went to you, I had no expectations because I was so excited about Raleigh. I was like, this is the place I'm going to move to. So when I went to you, we were going to go see a neighborhood, and I was like, oh, I don't know, because, I saw this neighborhood. I was so excited, didn't work out. So I went with absolutely zero expectations to Sanford, and it blew me away because I didn't have those expectations. And that's the place that I am going to move to. So, I needed to have that experience of growth before I found the place that was for me.
Do you think that you would have felt as lonely and bored if you went to a place that was more exciting, like Savannah, like you mentioned before?
Yeah, I think I would have enjoyed Savannah much more
Mhm.
because I would have went with the purpose of I need to have a good time. So I don't think I would have planned things like movies or mall, because I just want to see the vibe. Like, because if I was going to move to Raleigh, that is what I'd be doing. I'd be going to a movie. I'd be going to a mall. That's the reason I primarily did that. But with Savannah, there's so many fun things that I could do, like a cemetery tour and just going to these really nice restaurants. And I think I'd plan more fun things for myself. I probably wouldn't feel as lonely. So yeah, it would definitely be different. But I would recommend, like, if you do want to move to a place, to do a solo trip to that place instead of going with a friend.
That's a good idea. I think that's a great idea, especially because I had moved across the country and I never did a solo trip. And so I had different expectations than when I got here, and I didn't really like get it.
Sorry, you cut out. What did you say?
Oh, I was saying I didn't really get it when I came here, what it was actually like to live here because I was always running off to
Mm.
Disney and not really seeing what it was like to actually live here. So I had different expectations when I came here.
That's a good point. Like people who are moving, you're not going to be doing all those touristy things all the time. You will be going to movies or just to a very chill restaurant, not to a super upscale. So I think it's really important to do those basic things if you're going to move to a specific area. Like for you, like Lake Mary, you're not going to Disney every day. You're going to Publix, you know?
Exactly.
There's
Which
like
is
a
not
different
really what
energy.
which is not what I pictured when I was coming down here, but it's good for you because you already saw all the ins and outs of like the town specifically. You didn't only do Disney and everything, which is what I thought this was when I moved down here.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I
So
think
that's really important.
a solo trip or at least a trip seeing what it's really like is very important if you are moving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
So circling back to the topic of more solo travel, I know we kind of touched upon this, but pros and cons.
Mm.
Is there anything you'd want to add?
So, like I said before, pros is you're getting to know yourself on such a deeper level, which I think is so necessary for growth. It makes you appreciate people so much more because, sometimes you're with your friend and you wish you were alone. But now I honestly don't get that feeling. Like when I'm with you or when I'm with people who I love to be around, I'm always just so grateful because I know what it's like to be alone and to feel like scared and lonely. So it makes me so much more appreciative. So that's such a pro to realize that for your own life. Con was definitely the safety aspect and the feeling of like, oh, I wish I could just socialize right now. Honestly, in Raleigh, like we talked about making friends, there was really no opportunity to make friends. I was just going to the mall. It wasn't like I was going to strike up a conversation with anybody at the mall. I think if I was going to go to Savannah, I'm more likely because there's more tourists there. I could go on a cemetery tour and build a bond with somebody about an interest that we're doing together. Raleigh was literally just me alone. And I wasn't going to
Mhm.
go out at night because I knew that was dangerous. And like we were talking about before, traveling with friends, I don't really go out at night anyway. So I was kind of grateful that I didn't have to. But like I said, if I was going to go with you now, I'd be grateful that we were going out because I know what
Mhm.
it's like to be on the flip side. So, yeah, I would definitely say the con is safety. And if you don't plan ahead and you're not research and you're in that position, it is very scary. But like I said, it's an opportunity for growth and to learn from your mistakes. And most of the time, you are going to be fine. You will get through it. So I think solo travel is something that everybody should try, but within their own boundaries, within their own reasoning, in a time that they feel 100% comfortable to go.
I do have a comment actually about what you said about not being able to go out when you were there because you didn't feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
I have a friend that solo traveled recently to Washington, D.C., and she told me that she was going out and partying every night and she made so many friends and she felt completely safe. So that's a pretty different perspective than what you gave. So I'm,
Yeah, I think it also depends where you go. I mean, Rally, maybe I would have been safe. I also think it just depends on your personality. Like, you know me, I don't really go out to bars anyway.
Mhm.
And I was saying before in the traveling with friends that you're the one who really like pushes me to go out in a good way. So it's just not really me. And maybe that is how I make friends, but I don't think that's my type of way to make friends. Like, I don't really make friends with people when I go out. I make friends with people who are in similar interests and clubs
Yeah.
as me. And I didn't do that in Raleigh. So I think, like I said, if I was going to go to Savannah, I think I would make friends because I'd be doing a day trip somewhere and we'd all be talking about the same kind of thing. But for somebody like your friend, maybe she's just more extroverted. She likes going out. That's where she would attract people who are similar minded. But I probably wouldn't make friends with somebody like that because that's just not my personality.
That's a good point. So yeah, I guess it really depends what kind of person you are.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good point. Okay. I'm trying to think if I have any other questions for you. Any other last minute thoughts, advice, recommendations, anything you want to get off your chest?
No, I mean, like I said, I think everybody should solo travel within their own reason. But if you don't feel comfortable, don't feel like you need to. If you just want to travel with friends, that's so valid. You don't have to do this just for a period of growth. Like if I was telling Julia, a period of growth, you could just go to a restaurant and eat by yourself. You really don't have to travel if that's not what you want. You need to just follow your own intuition. But I know, Julia, that you actually do want to solo travel, but you're just a little bit scared. So, somebody like Julia, I would say maybe push yourself. But if you don't have that desire on your heart, don't force it because you're just going to make yourself uncomfortable in a situation that you don't want to be in. And it, like I said, it is a lot of money. Every Uber I had to pay for myself, the hotel I had to pay for myself, everything I could not split with anybody. So it
Hmm.
is more inexpensive of a trip.
I had never thought about that. Yeah, because when you're going with a friend, you're always splitting transportation and the room. But when I see that price of the room, I'm paying that whole price for
Mm-hmm.
solo travel.
Exactly. And like think about it, me and you, we always are in like a queen size bed or a king size bed together. It's fine. But when you're by yourself, like I'm still getting a queen size bed, but I'm just not splitting the cost with anybody. And that's also something to consider. You need to have the money because, and like I said, if you don't have the money, you can be put in a unsafe situation because maybe you're like, oh, let me walk home instead of Ubering, which could be really dangerous because you don't have the money.
Hmm.
So just think ahead, do it right or don't do it at all.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And you could still do it on a budget. There are budget type hotels or maybe cut back on some activities, but you don't want to stay in a budget type hotel that's so out of the way that you're putting yourself in danger.
And I probably ended up spending more money on Ubers. And like I said, I couldn't walk out of the hotel. And even in the hotel was not very nice. There was nowhere to like lounge. I couldn't hang out at the pool. There was no pool. It was literally in the middle of grassland, which is, it was just not safe. It was like the budget inn of like Raleigh. And
So
it
it
was
was
just
more like a
outside of the way.
motel.
It was like a little bit more than a motel, but definitely not as nice as the Ace Hotel, which
Yes.
I guess should have splurged, but at the same time, I was doing so much on the trip that I had to cut back somewhere. But maybe I shouldn't have cut back on the hotel because that's safety.
But also, you weren't really going into it to have a nice time. And you had
I
never solo
wasn't.
traveled before. Now you know for next time.
100% when I go to Savannah, if I'm doing it by myself or even if we're doing it together, that is where I'm going to spend a good chunk of the money because, that's priority for me. And I do want to have a good time when I go
Hmm.
to Savannah as
Yeah,
opposed to Raleigh.
I hope we could do it together because I want to go there as well. But if in the event that we don't, at least you know what to do so you could stay safe and still have a good time.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's pretty much it. That's pretty much all I have to say about solo travel.
All right. And just like one more question. I know you said you would recommend it for pretty much anyone except maybe someone who doesn't want to solo travel. Don't push yourself. But is there anyone else you wouldn't recommend it for, or any more comments on that?
That's a good question. I just feel like young women really need to be careful. Obviously, like older women do too, but I just feel like young women, we have this mentality almost that, like we're there to make friends, like I said, and be whimsical and be fun and like let's meet this guy, that guy. Like I feel like there is more of that young girl energy that you might not think in your head, which will cause you to get into very unsafe situations. And I feel like most of the time that's people who do want to solo travel.
Hmm.
So, like I said, don't psych yourself out to the point that you're not going to do it. But for people who maybe yourself, you're a little bit more naive, you think things are more magical, to kind of bring yourself down just a little bit and be a little bit more realistic so that you can be better prepared. Other than that, honestly, men, you should be fine. Obviously, things happen to men, but I think they're a little bit, more safe. Like I feel
Yeah.
like people are less likely to take advantage of them. If there's any teenagers listening, I'm talking to you too. You could solo travel, but also with the money, you want a budget. So I think young women are at the most risk. And like I said, you just need to prepare even more.
Yeah, and especially you don't like you were saying about how some people think things are more like whimsical than they actually
Mm-hmm.
are, and you might feel like invincible. That especially I feel like applies to Paris because you get
Yeah,
such like a magical vibe when you hear about it, but it's not really like that in person. So I think you really need to look into the destination you're going to before you go there as a solo traveler, and then you get there and you say, "Wait, this isn't how it is on TV. I don't feel safe."
for sure. And especially like think about it in terms of guys, like you want to go out, oh, I'm by myself, I'm gonna meet somebody, which you can. And I'm sure a lot of people are together from that, married from that, but you just have to be safe. You can't be like, oh, I'm gonna meet somebody, let me bring him back to my hotel first night. That is not smart. I would not advise that. Like I said, you can go out and meet somebody, but you need to be prepared and not think that everybody's your friend and they have your best interest at heart because a lot of the times they may not.
It's true. That's a great point.
Yeah.
All right, I think that's all my questions for you.
Amazing.
I'm really glad I got
So
to talk to you about this because I feel
yeah.
like we've been kind of talking about solo travel for so long, but also never really talking about it.
Yeah, so do you think anything changed your mind or do you feel better about anything?
I do because I never really had any of these tips in my head because I was always just like, all right, bring pepper spray. That's really all I was thinking in my head. I never really had a solid plan, but I think you
Mm-hmm.
brought up a lot of good points about where you stay And I feel a lot more comfortable going into it and planning ahead and knowing these tips that now I can plan a trip and not feel like I'm going to die the whole time.
Exactly. I think there's so much more preparation that you can do before it even gets to the point that you need that pepper spray. Do you know what I'm saying? Like there's so many things that like you should research or make sure you don't go to this place or that place that you don't even put yourself in a situation where that would need to happen.
Because, yeah, that should be the last resort. That should just be something I have
Mhm.
on me because I have it on me. It shouldn't be that I'm planning to use it.
Exactly. Yeah. Like I said, like there's so many steps before then that you can take and it could lead to a safe travel.
Exactly. Yeah. Put yourself in a situation that you wouldn't have to use it in.
Exactly.
All right. That's great advice, Katie. Thank you.
Thanks.
So I think we're ready. I'm nervous.
Okay, awesome. So the question is, what
Mhm.
country has the longest coastline in the world?
Okay. Hmm. This is really hard. I don't think I'm gonna get it. I have four guesses.
Okay. How about you do the main one
Okay.
and then you can tell me your others, but I'm only accepting the main one.
Okay. So should I tell you the main one first? And then or should I tell you my order?
Tell me your order. Tell me like what are your thoughts?
Okay, I'm gonna say Canada's my number one.
Okay.
Greenland's my number two. United States is my number three. And Brazil is my number four.
Okay. So the answer to what country has the longest coastline in the world is indeed Canada.
Yay!
See, I told you were good at this. What
I
what made you decide on Canada?
I felt like I was wrong because Canada doesn't have anything above it. So it goes all the way around. Because
Mm.
originally I was thinking United States because they have two coastlines. But in thinking more, I was like, Canada wraps around. So almost all of Canada is a coastline except for the bottom of it. And then they have so
Mm.
many islands too, which the whole entirety of an island is basically a coastline.
That's really smart. I feel like I'd be really confused on this question because I'd be thinking of an actual island and not a country that people inhabit. Like when I think of Canada, I don't think of like beaches. So I wouldn't even think of coasts, you know?
Yeah. No, I was just thinking of parts touching the water. I was never really thinking about beaches.
I need to stop asking you geography questions because you're always going to get it.
I know. I'm good at geography.
That's good. See,
Because
this is a recent skill.
did I ever tell you that me and Frank, when in college, we would sit down at lunch every day and we would pull up the map of the world, and there was this program on the internet, and you would put each country into where it goes, and we were trying to get like 100% and like the fastest time and everything.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I have a lot of practice.
Yeah, see, I don't really do all that. So,
We would just get bored. I don't do it
wow.
anymore, but I still kind of remember
We should do
things.
that. I feel like that'd be really fun.
We should maybe get an extra point if you get the best time, even though I have a lot of practice.
Yeah, I mean,
So
I prefer GeoGuessr.
I love GeoGuessr. I was just thinking about it the other day.
I know. I was like, I bought a whole subscription for a year and I'm not using it.
We'll use it when you come down next week.
Perfect. We'll
Yes.
do that for like a whole day.
We did it for hours last time.
Oh, so much fun. I want to do it again.
I know, me too. Now I can't stop thinking about it.
I know. All
Maybe
right.
after
So
this.
I know, can we please?
We can. Yeah, I'll share my screen.
So, is there anything else you want to mention before we wrap it up?
What is our score? Am I winning?
I think you're winning now.
I'm
I think you're
winning.
1 point ahead. Yeah.
That's what I wanted to mention. I wanted to brag. Okay.
Good job.
Thank you. And okay, yes, so there are some things, real things I want to mention. So if you want to check out my blog, it's www.runwaysandbyways.com. You could check out my Instagram at Runways and Byways. Please follow me. You can check us out on YouTube, Runways and Byways on YouTube. Subscribe to us. What am I forgetting? On my blog, I have travel planning services that I run with Katie. We'll give you choose your destination. We have travel advice and we have travel recommendations. And we also have a freebie on my blog where you can get a free travel planner. You just put in your email address and your name and you get your travel planner. And I actually had some people sign up from our last episode. So thank you so much. I hope you're enjoying your budget travel planner and I hope it helps you on your next trip. And I think that's all, right, Katie?
Yeah, that's all for me.
Perfect. All right. Bye, everyone. Whether your plane is taking off from the runway,
Or you're driving down a byway
we'll be your guides
through it all.